Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Now, I just posted all of our the weekly post. I'm just reposting the study in Mark. I believe I did some of that study here in Texas, and then did one of my New York, New Jersey trips, and kind of finished it up there. I did that. Just those who watch those or follow, sometimes I do things like that. Yesterday I was going to do a little update, and then I was messing with the phone and camera, and I didn't get to make it. There's a few different stories. This will just be like a little talk about things. One of the breaking news things the last few days again was the New York Times published a story, and it was, either leaked or however they got it. But the FBI actually had opened up an investigation into President Trump, whether he was a Russian agent. Not just, colluding with Russia, but if he was a secret agent for Russia. Okay. Now that story, made it to every one of the cable news and everything else. That they investigated whether he was, what was that movie about the Manchurian Candidate? Okay, the thing about that's troubling in this sense, they also put in the article, and it was revealed, was it some secret intelligence they had that caused them to open up an investigation for the deep state to do that? No, they were the statements that Mr. Trump made publicly. Statements like, why don't we get along with Russia? If I become president, it'd be better for us to have Russia as an ally. It was statements like that were in the public domain that our FBI deemed worthy to say, let's investigate whether he's an actual puppet for Putin. Now, I can go back and give you many statements, either from Mr. Obama when he was on an open microphone speaking to the former president of Russia, whose name was Medvedev. Medvedev, I think, is how they said it. And he was like president for a while, and then Putin got back in office, Russian president. But he didn't know he was on an open microphone, Mr. Obama. And he said, look, after the election, we'll work things out. But basically, I can't, do it now because of the election, meaning working with Russia. And you can have so many statements, whether it was Hillary Clinton who said, we're going to reset relations with Russia. So all of those statements, if anybody in the public domain said, therefore, Obama or Hillary or whoever are secret puppet Russian agents, the entire journalistic community would laugh and mock and say, what a joke. But yet you have serious newspapers, cable news, and so forth that have run with this story as a serious story that Trump was a Russian agent, that they had to investigate that. That's why journalism is fake news, because you could have things of that nature. I had a video that's still on YouTube, and I don't repost that one because, I just look at titles when I repost, and it was My Muslim Faith. And it was simply a video to show there's a video you could still find, I believe it is still on YouTube, where Mr. Obama gave an interview with George Stephanopoulos, a media man who used to be work with the Clintons and all. He used to be in politics, and then he became a media man. And I don't dislike George Stephanopoulos. He seems like a fairly good media person. But when he was interviewing President Obama at one time, Mr. Obama said, my Muslim faith. And then George Stephanopoulos corrected him and said, you mean your Christian faith? And then Mr. Obama said, Yes, my Christian faith. Okay, no biggie. Mr. Obama had a history of, he published a book at one time with a book publisher. Now, I forget if it was Dreams of My Father or one of the books Mr. Obama had published before he was president. And the book publisher put in the book, Kenyan born, I believe, Kenyan born, to promote the book. So, Mr. Obama, in order to promote it, and the way he was coming up, told the book publisher he was born in Kenya. John, did they look at all that? This came up. Of course people looked at it. They said, then the book publisher went back and said, oh, it was a typo. And then just threw it. This is not to say Mr. Obama's a bad man. It's to say that he kind of played into, maybe was deceptive himself at times of where he was born, because maybe it would give him a different, persona. And we understand he was born in Hawaii. Most of us understand that. And when you had all those things, statements from the president and his history, I was never real critical of, because Mr. Obama's upbringing in Muslim schools at certain times when he was younger, in Indonesia maybe, either way, he seemed to have, not been, he felt like he was a man of various, upbringing that would be a benefit. That seemed to be like, he didn't shy away from it, but then because it became politically hot, then it was, we understood the church he went to was a very liberal church in the Chicago area, and though it was a Christian church, but then the media, even though you had like statements like that, or statements where Mr. Obama would say things like, let's get along with on the open mic, there was an overall viewpoint that, I remember Chris Matthews, a media man, one time in defense of Mr. Obama showed his racism. Because what he said was, Mr. Obama, as a black man, he was defending President Obama, he thought he was, and he said, he did everything we have asked a black man to do. He raised a good family. He came up and he did, what more can he do for us? You know how racist that was, because it was in essence saying, we want to show ourselves as liberal, as media, as like we like the black man. He's like our puppet. And because of that, we don't actually do a real journalistic, critique of him like we would of any other person. And oftentimes, the liberal mindset cloaks itself in, and they don't even understand that they are demeaning to a black man when they speak that way. What do I think, when I look at the atmosphere we're in now, China, Canada, at the request of the United States, detained one of the top executives of China's top tech industry, which is Huawei. I used to have a Huawei phone and all, and they're really like the leaders of China. That would be like the American Microsoft or Facebook or something of that nature. But China had, at the request of the U.S., detained this executive in Canada. Canada detained this Chinese executive. A few weeks ago, I spoke on it. Because we are accusing, the U.S. is accusing that company, and she's the daughter of the founder of that Huawei, the top executive, of violating particular Iran sanctions. Okay, I do understand that Huawei is a private company, but it's also, China is sort of like, everything's kind of connected. All right, and so when that was done, there was questions whether Trump even knew that was going to be done. Sort of like they did it, our legal agencies made the decision to detain that woman based on that particular warrant that she would have to. Then they let her out on bail. Now, China, they don't see any of those things as sort of like the U.S. is now, kind of expanding if we see a violation of whatever it is. And so there's a Canadian kid who was convicted of drug smuggling in China a few years ago. They gave him 15 years in prison. He appealed his sentence. After the appeal, they gave him the death penalty yesterday or the day before. It's not the first time China's done that. And then Russia and China basically are, if you will, not just retaliating, but they're basically also saying, you have a game going on in your country at this time. And part of your game is your whole journalistic community is taking serious, stupid statements that one of your political people would make, saying, let's work with Russia. Let's work. And your whole journalistic community in your United States of America is saying those statements themselves by presidents of the United States are possible evidence to open up an investigation whether Russia or whatever country has a secret agent heading up the United States, which is an absolute complete joke. But yet, the debacle of journalism in this country is now engaged itself in such a way where some of these other countries, China, Russia particularly, are positioning themselves not just because of those statements, not just because the majority of people should be able to see the stupidity of these things, but they're saying, you've also made it impossible. The serious issues about Russia, the serious issues about world affairs are not only how we in this country are viewing everything in this little bubble we're in, but how do these things affect things in the world scene? So you've made it almost impossible for any leader of the country to try to reevaluate some things that we have done that could lead to war. Meaning, we've had sanctions on Russia for a period of time now, starting under President Obama, but some of those sanctions are indeed unjust in the sense they have to do with things that have to do with Ukraine. But yet, some of the opposition that we have against Russia, some of it is really political. See, we've involved ourselves in the Western world and other countries for all types of various reasons over a long history of time. And there are certain things that Russia, as a country, felt like was a harm also to their national defense, meaning the building up of NATO troops along the former USSR satellite states that broke up, and you have different countries now, Georgia, Ukraine, places like that. And we kind of made agreements in the past with Russia that, look, we're not going to put any big weapons and troops and build up right on the border of these former Russian states. We kind of make you that promise, Russia. Then we lied. And we started building up NATO troops, saying we must protect, but yet that was wrong for us to do. And they have an interest in Ukraine because Russia has a military, naval port right off of the shores, the Baltic. But either way, there are legitimate, real geopolitical issues where Russia or China or anybody would want the United States to seriously reevaluate as we move forward as a global society, which you will never be able to now have a leader, particularly Mr. Trump, try to make any peace in any of these things that I just discussed, because you have fake journalism, uninformed journalism, who have now said any statements by a U.S. president or Mr. Trump, any actions to try to bring peace, to try to bring down some of the high tension areas or withdrawal out of Syria, which I'm for. I didn't care if it was Trump or Obama. We shouldn't have our men all over the world in these places. We shouldn't have countries like Turkey, who are violators of human rights left and right, and yet many in the journalistic community say, because now that Turkey is a member of NATO, that if anybody attacks Turkey, including Russia, that our sons and daughters will die on the fields of some Arab land. Our journalists advocate for that, meaning we should never have allowed Turkey to be a part of NATO. That should have never been done. So you have a lot of real world issues that your media is unable and unwilling. It would be a huge joke if you took a statement from Mrs. Hillary Clinton when she said, let's reset relations with Russia. Or you took an open mic from Mr. Obama when he told the former Russian president, don't worry, after the election we'll work together. Now, if any U.S. intelligence agency deemed any of those statements as let's investigate Hillary or Obama for being Russian agents, that would be a huge national joke. You are a joke, media, because these last few days, because the report in the New York Times, cable outlet after cable outlet after cable outlet has seriously reported the FBI investigated whether Mr. Trump was a Russian agent. And I just explained to you why that is so seriously dangerous in the real world atmosphere that I tried to give you a little better view of, meaning there's real national issues. That's the irresponsibility of it, okay? That's where we're heading. I think some of the actions, the retaliation, both with China and Russia, and sort of like diplomatic things going on, I believe we're trending towards serious things. I really believe that because we're unable now in our country, because of the way the media has driven things, we're really unable to seriously make important decisions that would cause us to work somehow in harmony with other countries. Any type of decision that would ratchet down tensions in the new Cold War with Russia, any of that, the media now would say is an indication that Trump is a puppet of Russia, which is an absolute, complete, total joke, and it's a dangerous joke. Why do the media play that? Because they're unable to educate people, and they're unable to give you a fair and balanced view of what's really going on in the world. Okay? You know, the other day, and I'm doing some uploading and trying to get some video things going, and I noticed at the end of last year, beginning of this year, one of the things that's also being challenged by the tech revolution is the old DirecTV and all this type of stuff. I don't have DirecTV. I got rid of cable TV 10 years ago. I wasn't going to pay $120 a month, whatever it was. All I really needed was the internet. And because I got all these other TVs, I finally bought the Roku system, which meaning I watch all the news. I even watch New York City news. You know, the news for my hometown in North Bergen, if you go on-demand online news, if you go to any city that you were from in the United States and you hit what's the local news for that city, you know, the local news for where I grew up is actually the ABC, NBC, CBS out of New York City, okay? That is the local news. When you look for North Bergen, New Jersey, that's how you would get your local news. And so I watched the local New York ABC, NBC on the news, on demand, not through cable or satellite, but through online. the tech industry took a huge hit in cable and DirecTV. And some, forecasters in looking at these investment things, they basically said the cable news is going by the wayside. The other day, I check on the church I attend, mostly Church Unlimited. Pastor Bill Cornelius was going to be on TBN. Because I'll look at Facebook on Church Unlimited to see what's coming up for the week. And it was interesting because I'm glad that Bill was on TBN, Pastor Bill. I didn't get to watch it. But there was only like a few comments and a few shares. And some of the younger kids, I'm assuming they were younger, were saying, "What's TBN?" And some other people said, "Oh, you can catch it on, back in the old days, whether it was TBN or whatever Christian station." That's kind of like the dinosaur age now. And I think maybe people are realizing that. Some were saying that the whole satellite TV and cable is going by the wayside. Because how do I watch my New York news? I don't have cable. I don't have a landline on the phone anymore, okay? So those things kind of have changed. Also, Russia, this just came to mind. They sold all of their U.S. Treasury bonds and debts this last year. That was kind of in the news. Why did Russia do it? People question. But now they're going to make a huge purchase of Bitcoin as well. Basically, Russia has tried to not demonetize, but get all of their assets of cash and investments out of the dollar, out of the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar really is the standard currency for all transactions throughout the world, believe it or not. So you have France and Italy are different. It's the bottom line. But people are there's like trending away from that. Of course, there's other currencies in other countries. But Russia is completely dislodging itself from the U.S. dollar. Now, some people believe that countries take those actions in preparation for war. And as much as it's hard as for me to try to say that I think that what we're doing in the country at this time, with all of the Trump stuff and the secret puppet, the world looks at it in the joke that it really is, but they're also looking at it saying, you have made it unable for the leader of your country, Mr. Trump at this time, to even make a statement that they would like to have peaceful relations with Russia. And there's serious things on the table that these other countries were looking at, hopefully to work with the Western world. And the media has made it now a joke, a total joke. The same media that if Mr. Obama told his book publisher, say I was born in Kenya, which he did. The same media that if Mr. Obama said, my Muslim faith, and if anybody, there are many people who do indeed believe that Mr. Obama was indeed a Muslim. I won't do that whole issue. But even the statement of that, Google and YouTube, the media would say, how dare you? It shows you their inability. I should say, how dare you even think that any statement by any leader about peace with another country would be grounds to open up a secret FBI. And you say, then why did the FBI do it? Well, you have statements from the people that were involved in that, Mr. McCabe and others, their own text statements that said, we're going to have to bring this guy down. We've got to have our secret plan. Okay. Mr. Mueller and the Justice Department also illegally deleted all those texts. There were a whole bunch of texts, not the Hillary Clinton emails, but texts from McCabe and Strzok and Lisa Page and all going back and forth. And Mueller and his people actually said, we looked at it and we got rid of it. They illegally did that. They should not have got rid of all those texts because they didn't want some of that to get out. We as a society should speak truth. I watched the special on Black Lives Matter. And it was very interesting. I didn't watch the whole thing. It was on Netflix. but it was also how governments began using the internet to actually government spyware to begin spying on people, and they did it with Black Lives Matter. They did it with, and it's very interesting. We speak truth to power, and if it's speaking the truth, a lot of people are caught up in this let's attack Trump thing because we truth to power. But there's a power structure that people refer to as deep state, which is all this little cabal of people that could take a statement. We want peace with Russia. You're a secret agent. We're going to open. That's also truth to power. Do you understand? That's also truth to power. No individual agents of any legal structure in this country should take it upon themselves to hop up types of things and to say, oh, this is enough for us to get a FISA warrant. No, you don't make those like in-house decisions, which most of the public had seen were partisan and politically biased, and that then slipped over into the legal atmosphere and getting things into the New York, Southern District of New York. Let's investigate this. No, most of us are seeing that you're playing a game with that. So that'll just be the little update. I wanted to do that. We'll see how we're continuing to. I'm continuing to mess with some of the other sites, as most of you see. And I saw some of my friends the last few days. And so that's the danger, though, of the big story that I would want to impress on people. You know, Mrs. Ginsburg, I gave a little prophecy about Justice Ginsburg this last year. They're still on YouTube. She's had some health issues. I think she's been on the bench now with the Supreme Court almost 40 years. I thought I read that. But for the first time ever, she missed opening statements last week, 3 days in a row, because of health issues. Though the media, cancer, things of that nature, but yet that media report, oh, she's up, she's jovial, she's laughing. No, she's in serious condition. She's an older woman. But the thing about the way the media propped her up, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, wow, what a brilliant legal mind. You know, our Supreme Court at one time in our history deemed the black man not as human as the white man. I wonder if our media would say, and that was precedent. That was precedent by the U.S. Supreme Court, that the black man was not considered as human as the white man. And it was racist and about as wrong as you can be. But that was precedent. And you have many of the greatest so-called legal minds of our day that you can take a beautiful child from a woman that's 9 months pregnant, and say if she had a C-section, say if the child just was born, beautiful gift, the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs and the others would tell you that the second before it comes out of the womb, it is not a human. That's their legal definition. It is not a human. Now, if you are that demented, as the court was when it said a black person is not as human as a white person, then you do not have a brilliant legal mind. You have an old, demented mind. If you cannot say that, and you talk about rights, you talk about advocating for the rights of people, you are deceived when you do those things. I'm no big defender of Mr. Trump, but I think it's a joke and a scandal what's going on right now. I think it's a joke and a scandal. I think it was a joke and a scandal that any critics of Mr. Obama, who people had legitimate criticisms of, that you wouldn't even have, when Mr. Obama himself presented himself as Kenyan born in a book that he published, and he told that publisher he was Kenyan born. And when that came out, and people said, okay, you lied to kind of promote your book. How dare you even if the statement from Mr. Obama himself, the actual statement, my Muslim faith, that's deemed hate speech for you to show that video. But well, I'm just showing the words of how dare you even show the words of that man. Okay, so you defended him to the point where you demeaned the black man because you said we want everyone else to view us. There were legitimate liberal critics of Mr. Obama, men I liked, Cornel West. I listened to Eric Dyson, is Rudolph Dyson. These are liberal intellectuals who criticized and critiqued Mr. Obama. Okay? That you should be open to saying no, whether a person is white or black. If you purposefully say, we want to show ourselves as lovers of the black race, you should love all people. And therefore we will not correctly scrutinize a black leader or a black president because we want all the public to see. Well, that's a game. I remember one time there was an interview, and it was some very liberal Democrat on a panel with a black leader who was an activist. Martin Luther King Day is coming up. I usually speak about him when I'm a fan of Martin Luther King Jr. And then the white Democrat says something like, we're for the black people. He said, because we're for more welfare, not realizing what a demeaning thing that was. And the black civil rights leader, whoever it was at that time, looked at that white Democrat and said, you say you're for us because you're for food stamps, you're for welfare. He said, that's enslaving us. From the black man to the white liberal, from the black man to the Chris Matthews, who say, no, we love you, Mr. Black Man. Well, that black civil rights leader looked at you and said, you're a disgrace. When you think, sadly, you had the death of a Christian missionary in this last 6 months. Now, I've included his death in my prayer time, because I pray for the martyrs, those who've been martyred. Now, I forget it was a black tribal nation that's very isolated region, Senegalese or wherever it was, and this Christian missionary wanted to go in and sort of, reach that tribe, but they were very isolated. Now, the coverage of this, they killed that Christian missionary with bows and arrows. But the coverage was very racist, because after this missionary was killed, most of the media reported sort of like they are isolated and they're living their culture. We respect that. And they're living sort of like in an ignorant, primitive life, but that's the way they are. That's the way we allow them to live there. Nobody really enters that region. And nobody really said, should there be charges because they shot him with a bow and arrow? They said, no, because these are, primitive. And I thought, the way we treated that was racist. Because that was the same way in the whole evolution debate, Charles Darwin and others, that there's so many racist statements from those men, that the Aborigine tribes was proof that the black race could not evolve like the white, all these types of things. And we treated, I'm not saying we should have held the tribes that killed that missionary responsible for homicide. But the fact that the media sort of said, look how open we are. We let them live there in their natural habitat, uneducated. But no. We could reach those people, and they could become educated. If you read the writings of the black slave who escaped the South, Frederick Douglass, is it? But many people deemed that the black man would never be able to be a doctor or a Supreme Court justice. Their view, even the image of the different features of black people, Their view was, and then you see them speak. Oh, and I felt that that was our treatment of that tribe when they killed that missionary. Sort of like, we respect these people living in the wild. They sort of treated them like animals. And that's the way they live. And if people go in, they raise their bows and arrows at the airplanes. And no. It would be compassionate to reach that group of people and to say, no, we don't want to conform you to some white European, but we want you to understand that you were created in the image of God. And you don't have to stay in a primitive lifestyle. And I understand that the main narrative was they're happy, sort of like animals in the wild, as how all the media treated that. Racist. How dare you look at some black tribe and say, well, they'll never know any better than to shoot a bow and arrow and they're racists. The liberal racists are the worst you'll ever see. Because they truly look at the black man. The Donnie Deutsches of MSNBC, who will go on MSNBC and say, I don't know what that man is energy. I don't know. They're not even a news organization. But he goes on and he looks at the camera and says, the problem is the white man. And I am white. Okay, I understand that. The self-hate. And you believe that you're for the black man. But you secretly have that narrative. Oh, let the black tribe live. Just because they're shooting bows and arrows at airplanes. How wonderful. No, you're demeaning. You're some of the worst racists in the history of the world. The liberal mind. The RBGs. Oh, look at that beautiful 9-month black child, Miss Ginsburg. No, that's not a human. My legal mind tells me that's not a human, and it's the right to kill it. And you'd call yourself a great, brilliant legal mind? You're going the way of all the earth, Miss Ginsburg. The word I prophesied her death. Not that she'd be murdered again, but she's old, and her mind is no longer there. And that she would go the way of all the earth. And those prophecies are on YouTube. What's the official position of Google and YouTube? Their view is almost, we are offering a platform for you to post videos and things. But we are also a political arm of the Democratic Party, and particularly Miss Hillary Clinton. It's almost like if you had a conversation with them and said, okay, look, I post Christian things, and yes, but we want Hillary only. That's actually what I think their view is. Say, what about some of these younger Democrats coming up? I mean, don't you think, no. Even if she passes away, we want to elect her post-mortem. It's almost like, look at the younger voices of the Democratic Party. Look, I'm not a conservative. I like Beto O'Rourke from Texas. About as, progressive as, what's her name? Now I understand their viewpoints and how you could have Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, what are they, 70 or 80? As the face of the Democratic Party. Okay, so let's just end this. This is just an update. We'll see what we do I went real long. Of course, I get some teachings coming up, as we normally do. And let's speak truth to power. Don't cloak yourself in, I'm a white man and I demean. I go on national TV and say the problem is white men and I'm white. Oh, somehow that makes you. No, the problem is you're still looking at color and skin. Don't you get it? If your inability to critique a black man in a right way, like you would critique any other man, that's a racist mindset you have. Because you deem the black man is less than you, or else you would critique him the same. Do you understand? When you look at that Aborigine tribe or people shooting arrows at airplanes, and your whole media says those peaceful, isolated black people living, what racists? No, they're not animals. I'm not saying hold them accountable for the killing of the missionary, but quit treating them like they're a bunch of pack of wild dogs. That's how the media treated that tribe. All right. We pray a blessing on everybody. In Jesus' name.